He had seen blood, betrayal, and war, but never something that made his chest tighten like this. When the most feared mafia boss in Italy saw his maid hiding bruises on her arms, he didn't know it yet. But what he'd do next would shock the entire city. It was one of those mornings that looked too calm for the kind of man who lived inside that house. The Romano estate stood high above the city, sunlight spilling across marble floors, birds singing over distant gardens. But inside, silence ruled. Because inside lived Don Alessandro Romano, a man whose name made criminals whisper and cops look away. He was the kind of man who'd built an empire out of fear. And yet, on this quiet morning, something, or rather someone, was about to shake the very ground beneath his heart. It happened in a second. A fragile sound, a cup slipping from trembling hands, shattering across the polished floor. Alessandro looked up from his morning newspaper, eyes narrowing beneath the golden sunlight. There she was, Lucia, the new maid, a young woman with soft brown eyes and a silence that seemed heavier than her frame. She froze in place, staring at the broken cup, her hands shaking. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His presence alone filled the room with enough authority to make any soul tremble. But this time, she was trembling too much. Alessandro quietly, "Leave it. The cleaner will handle it." Her head jerked up, startled, almost terrified by his voice. Then, in one clumsy motion, she bent down to pick the pieces herself. That's when he saw it. For just a second, as her sleeve slipped back, the sunlight caught something dark. A faint line, a shadow under her pale skin. A bruise. At first, he thought he imagined it. Maybe it was just the light. But when she moved again, he saw the unmistakable outline, the bluish tint spreading across her arm. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Not from anger, not yet. From something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. A strange pull. He'd seen bruises before, on enemies, on men who crossed him, even on himself. But on her, a quiet maid, barely whispering, flinching at every sudden sound, it felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Lucia hurried to clean the mess, whispering apologies that tripped over each other. Alessandro didn't respond. He just watched, every movement, every flicker of her fear. Finally, he stood, slow, deliberate, like a shadow moving through sunlight. His voice was low, controlled. "Alessandro, what's your name again?" Lucia nervously. Lucia, sir." Alessandro. "Lucia. But you've been here 2 weeks, yes?" Lucia. "Yes, sir." Alessandro. "And you like working here?" Lucia. "Yes, very much, sir." Her voice cracked on the word much. He didn't ask more. He simply nodded once and walked away, his silence echoing louder than any threat could. But his eyes, they lingered. That afternoon, the mansion returned to its routine. Guards patrolled the gates. Servants hurried down hallways. Alessandro sat in his study, but his mind wasn't on the ledgers or meetings. It was on that bruise, and on the way she had flinched when he moved. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Alessandro." "Enzo." A rough voice crackled through the intercom. "Yes, boss." "Alessandro. Find out everything about the new maid. Lucia. Where she came from, who hired her, who she worked for before. Everything." "Enzo." "Understood." He hung up, leaning back in his chair. Outside, sunlight spilled over his empire, a kingdom built on shadows and silence. But deep down, he knew shadows always hide something. Soft knock, hesitant voice. "Lucia." "Sir, may I clean the study?" He turned his chair slightly. She stood by the door, small, polite, her uniform crisp but cheap, her eyes fixed on the floor. For a second, he said nothing, just watched her. "Alessandro, go ahead." She nodded and entered, her steps light, almost ghostly. She began dusting the shelves, wiping the desk, carefully avoiding looking at him. But when she reached for a drawer handle, a picture frame toppled and hit the floor. A sharp crack echoed through the room. Her breath caught. She bent to pick it up, but froze when she saw the photo inside. It was a picture of a little girl, 6, maybe 7 years old, laughing in the sunlight, sitting on Alessandro's shoulders. The only trace of innocence left in a man like him. Lucia's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but didn't. And then, she felt it. A presence behind her. Slow. Heavy. Close. Alessandro low. Calm. Careful. That's not just a picture. She jumped, clutching the frame as though it were fragile glass, which, in truth, it was. She turned, hand shaking, eyes darting anywhere but his. He stepped closer, not threatening, but deliberate. His voice dropped lower. Alessandro. Who hurt you, Lucia? The air froze. Even the sunlight seemed to hesitate between them. Lucia's mouth opened, then closed again. Her fingers tightened around the picture frame until her knuckles turned white. Lucia whispering, "No one, sir." Alessandro, "Don't lie to me." Lucia, I fell. I'm just clumsy." Her words sounded rehearsed, like lines she'd said too many times before. Alessandro studied her face, the tiny tremor in her jaw, the dart of her eyes toward the door, the faint mark near her collarbone where her uniform didn't quite hide the truth. Every instinct in him screamed she was lying, but the way she held herself, small, afraid, like someone who had already been punished for speaking, told him something else. Whatever bruised her wasn't just skin deep. He said nothing more. Instead, he took the picture from her hands, placed it gently back on the shelf, and turned away. Alessandro, go finish your work. Lucia, yes, sir. Her voice was soft, almost broken. She left quietly, her footsteps fading down the hall. And Alessandro stood there, his reflection caught in the window glass. A man feared by thousands, now haunted by a single bruise on a girl's arm. That night, the mansion grew quiet again. The moonlight replaced the sun, and still, Alessandro sat in his study, staring at that photo of his daughter. He hadn't seen her in years. She lived far away, safe, untouched by the darkness he ruled. But something about Lucia, the fear in her eyes, stirred a memory he couldn't bury. A memory of a child crying once in the dark, and a man too blind, too busy, to protect her. Hours later, Enzo returned. He stood by the doorway, hat in hand. "Enzo, boss, I found something." Alessandro without turning. "Tell me." "Enzo, she's clean. No record. No family. She's moved around a lot. Different houses. Different employers. None of them kept her for long." Alessandro. "Why?" "Enzo, some said she was quiet. Others said trouble followed her." Alessandro's jaw clenched. He didn't believe in coincidence. If trouble followed Lucia, it meant someone sent it. He dismissed Enzo with a nod, but his mind kept turning, pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, Lucia lay awake in her tiny room, staring at the ceiling. Her arm ached beneath the thin blanket. She touched the bruise, flinched, and whispered something only the darkness could hear. Lucia broke in whisper, "Please don't find me again." Down the hall, Alessandro poured himself a drink. He told himself it was none of his concern. She was a maid. He was a mafia boss. Their worlds weren't meant to touch. But deep inside, where the walls of power couldn't protect him, he knew something was coming. Something that began with a bruise and would end with blood. As the clock struck midnight, he stood by the window, watching the lights of the city far below. He didn't see the shadow that moved quietly outside, past the garden, near the servants' quarters. Someone was watching Lucia's window. Someone who didn't belong there. And by morning, the peace of that house would be gone forever. Morning came again, golden sunlight washing over the Romano estate, trying to paint warmth where there was none. But beneath that light, shadows still moved, quiet, watching, waiting. Lucia walked through the grand hallway, carrying a tray of breakfast for the staff. Her sleeves were longer today, buttoned tight around her wrists. Her smile, small, polite, didn't reach her eyes. From his office upstairs, Don Alessandro Romano watched her through the glass balcony. Every movement of hers felt rehearsed, controlled. She avoided everyone's gaze, especially his. He told himself he didn't care. He was the boss of an empire. He didn't have time to be distracted by bruises on a maid's arm. But the truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about it. There was a kind of silence that made Alessandro restless. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of secrets. And this house was full of it. He poured himself coffee, his reflection shimmering in the dark glass window. His thoughts sharper than ever. Alessandro to himself. She says she fell, but her eyes tell a different story. He turned as Enzo, his most trusted man, entered the study, tall, broad, with a kind of loyalty that was born out of blood. Alessandro, you found anything? Enzo, enough to make you curious, boss. He handed Alessandro a small file. Inside, Lucia's record. Sparse. Clean. Too clean. No family. No criminal ties. But something about her history felt wrong. A trail of short-term jobs, dismissed without reason, and one employer's note scrawled at the bottom of a page. Untrustworthy. Rings trouble. Alessandro frowned, the words burning into his mind. Alessandro. Who wrote this? Enzo. A man named Rico. Gardener from her last house. Funny thing, he works here now. The name lingered like poison. Rico, the man Alessandro had seen around the grounds, heavy built, always scowling. He remembered how Lucia's gaze flickered when Rico passed by her yesterday. That fear, it wasn't random. It had a name now. But Alessandro stayed silent. If there was one thing he'd learned in his world, it was this. You don't attack shadows until you know how deep they go. Later that afternoon, the mansion basked in warm sunlight. Laughter echoed faintly from the kitchen, the staff sharing jokes over lunch. Lucia stood by the sink, washing dishes quietly, pretending to listen. But her hands trembled, because behind her, Rico leaned against the wall, watching. Rico low, taunting. You still don't talk much, huh? Same as before. Lucia froze. Her shoulders stiffened. Rico, you think he can protect you? You think that fancy boss upstairs cares about you? Chuckling coldly. You'll learn. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Her chest ached with fear, fear that no one could see. Because in this house, she was invisible. But what she didn't know was that someone was watching. Through the reflection of a polished glass cabinet, Alessandro had stopped mid-step in the hallway, his sharp eyes fixed on that small scene in the kitchen. He didn't hear every word, but he saw enough. The posture, the menace, the way Lucia's hand trembled as she reached for the next plate. Something inside him turned cold. A few hours later, Lucia was summoned to his office. The sunlight streamed in, cutting across the floor like golden blades. She entered hesitantly, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes down. Alessandro, close the door. The sound of the door clicking shut felt heavier than it should. He gestured toward the seat across from his desk. She sat, barely, her body stiff, as if ready to flee. Alessandro softly. Do you know why you're here? Lucia barely whispering. No, sir. Alessandro. I asked Enzo to look into you. You've worked in 6 houses in the last 2 years. Each one let you go. Lucia. Yes, sir. Alessandro. Why? Lucia. I don't know. Alessandro. I think you do. She blinked fast, her lips parting, but no sound came. Her throat tightened. Her chest rose and fell quickly. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Alessandro, someone hurt you. And whoever it was, they're not done yet, are they? Lucia looked up, eyes glistening. Lucia pleading. Please, don't get involved. You'll make it worse. Those words, soft, broken, hit harder than any bullet he'd ever taken. Alessandro's fingers drummed once on the desk. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he spoke. Alessandro, you're under my roof now. No one touches what's mine. Lucia. But I'm not. Alessandro interrupting. Enough. His tone was final. But as Lucia left, he saw her shoulder shaking, her hand clutching her sleeve like she was trying to hide from the world itself. And he knew this wasn't over. not by a long shot. That night, the estate slept under a calm sky. The guards patrolled lazily, confident nothing ever dared breach the walls of the Romano Empire. But power doesn't stop shadows. Inside her small room, Lucia sat on her bed, writing something in a small notebook. Names, maybe memories, maybe warnings. Every few minutes, she looked at the door, like she expected it to open. Downstairs, Alessandro was in his office again, lights dim, a single lamp illuminating the desk. He reviewed reports, pretending not to notice how his thoughts kept drifting back upstairs. He told himself it was business, just protecting what's his. But somewhere deep down, he knew the truth. He cared. Then, a flicker on the monitor. The mansion's security feed. Alessandro leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A shadow moved across one of the screens, near the servant's wing. A man, broad shoulders, quick steps. He zoomed in. Rico. And he wasn't supposed to be there at this hour. Alessandro's blood turned to fire. He grabbed his gun and stormed out of the office, his footsteps echoing through the marble hallway. He reached the back corridor, just in time to hear muffled sounds near Lucia's door. Her voice, small, pleading. Lucia from inside, terrified. Please, Rico, stop. The sound of something hitting the floor. A gasp, and then silence. Alessandro kicked the door open. It slammed against the wall, dust flying. There she was, Lucia on the ground, terrified, her hair loose, eyes wide with fear. And Rico, standing over her. Alessandro furious, deadly calm. Touch her again, and I'll bury you myself. Rico froze, the color draining from his face. For the first time, he looked smaller than the man he mocked just hours ago. Lucia's hand shook as she clutched her arm, the bruise darker now. Alessandro's gaze softened for just a second, then hardened again. Alessandro to his guards. Take him to the basement. I'll deal with him myself. The guards obeyed instantly, dragging Rico out as he shouted curses. Lucia tried to speak, tried to say something, but all that came out was a whisper. Lucia, you shouldn't have done that. They'll come for you now. He turned to her, the faintest look of surprise in his eyes. Alessandro. They? Lucia, shaking her head. Please just forget I said anything. He didn't press her, not yet. But inside, something twisted, because that single word, they, carried weight. And he knew this wasn't just about a cruel man and a frightened maid. This was something bigger, something reaching far beyond his mansion walls. He left her room, but his mind was burning. He walked back through the hallway, the sunlight from earlier now replaced by cold, creeping moonlight. And as he passed a window, he saw it, a car parked just beyond the gate. Headlights off, engine running. Someone was watching the house. And Alessandro Romano, the man who ruled the city through fear, realized for the first time. The danger wasn't inside his mansion anymore. It was closing in from the outside. The sun rose over the Romano estate, its light painting everything gold, the marble steps, the fountains, even the rose garden that stretched beyond the walls. It should have been a peaceful morning, but the house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. Don Alessandro Romano stood by his window, a cup of untouched coffee in his hand. He hadn't slept. Not after what happened last night. The image of Lucia, terrified in her room, still haunted him. And the name she whispered, "They'll come for you now," played over and over in his mind. Who were they? And what had she been running from all this time? Enzo firm. Boss, you need to see this. Alessandro turned. Enzo looked uneasy, his jaw tight, eyes dark with something heavy. They walked outside, down the marble steps, toward the back garden. The sun was already warm, but Alessandro felt a chill crawl down his spine. And then he saw it. In the middle of the rose garden, near the fountain, lay a trail of blood. Small at first, drops in the dirt, then darker, thicker. Lucia's white cleaning cloth lay on the ground, soaked red. Alessandro sharp. Where is she? Enzo. We found her here, boss. She's alive. Barely. Alessandro's heartbeat roared in his ears. He rushed forward. And there she was, lying in the grass, her arm cut, her face pale as marble. Lucia's eyes fluttered open as he knelt beside her. Lucia weak, trembling. Rico, he's not alone. Then she passed out. For a long second, Alessandro didn't move. His hand hovered near her face, the smallest, most human gesture he'd made in years. And then the fury hit. Cold, controlled, deadly. He stood, his expression turning to stone. Alessandro quiet but lethal. Bring Rico. Enzo already caught him trying to leave the grounds. He's in the basement. The guard stepped back as Alessandro walked past, slow, deliberate, his shoes crunching on gravel stained with blood. The sun shone bright overhead, but the air felt thick, heavy with something dark. The basement smelled of damp stone and iron. A single light swung from the ceiling, throwing long, shifting shadows on the walls. Rico was tied to a chair, defiant, bruised, eyes flashing with hate. Alessandro walked up to him, calm, almost too calm. Alessandro cold. You put your hands on a woman under my roof. You broke my rule. Rico grinning, blood on his lip. She's no woman, boss. She's a liar. You don't know who she really is. Alessandro. Then tell me. Rico. You think she's just a maid? She's bait. She was sent here by the Mancinis. They wanted her close to you. The name hit him like a bullet. Mancini. A rival family. A ghost from the past. Alessandro low, dangerous. You're saying she's working for Vito Mancini? Rico laughing through pain. She was supposed to feed them information. About your shipments. Your guards. Everything. But she got soft. Started caring for you. And when she refused to continue, they sent me to remind her who owns her. Alessandro's fingers clenched. He turned away, jaw tight, the rage trembling under his skin. He didn't want to believe it. Not Lucia. Not the girl who couldn't even meet his eyes without shaking. But the bruise on her arm, the fear in her voice, the blood on the roses. It all connected. Alessandro to Enzo. Lock him down. I want proof before I end him. Hours passed. The estate remained tense, guards on edge, phones ringing, whispers spreading. Lucia woke in one of the guest rooms, her arm bandaged, sunlight falling gently across her face. When she saw Alessandro standing in the doorway, she froze. Lucia softly. I didn't want this to happen. Alessandro cold. Then make me understand. She turned her face away, silent tears falling. For the first time, he saw her without the fear, just exhaustion, like someone who'd been running too long and finally had nowhere left to go. Lucia. They said if I didn't do what they asked, they'd hurt my sister. I never wanted to spy, sir. I didn't know how to get out. Her voice cracked. The truth hit like a knife. Alessandro. You're saying the Mancinis have your sister? Lucia nodding, whispering. They promised they'd let her go if I gave them information about you. But when I stopped, Rico came. He felt something unfamiliar, pity. And beneath it, something sharper, guilt. Because he knew what it meant to be trapped by power. He took a slow breath, his tone softening just slightly. Alessandro. Lucia. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Lucia through tears. You don't understand. They'll come for both of us. Alessandro firm. Then let them. That night, the mansion buzzed with quiet movement, guards checking perimeters, cars repositioned, lights dimmed. The Romano Empire was preparing for something, and at the center of it stood one man, calm as ever, hands clasped behind his back, staring out toward the rose garden where blood still stained the soil. He had spent a lifetime ruling through fear. But now, for the first time, he was fighting for something else, something dangerously close to human. Midnight fell. The city outside slept, unaware that war was about to wake. Enzo entered quietly. Enzo. Boss, we got confirmation. Rico was telling the truth. The Mancinis are behind this. And they've taken one of our men hostage. They're demanding Lucia in exchange. Alessandro icy calm. Where? Enzo. An old warehouse by the docks. They're waiting till dawn. Alessandro nodded slowly. His reflection in the window looked like the man he used to be, ruthless, decisive, untouchable. But now, that same reflection had something else behind the eyes, purpose. He turned to Enzo. Alessandro, gather the men. At dawn, we bring her sister home, and we end this. Enzo hesitant. Boss, if you do this, the Mancinis will retaliate. This could start a war. Alessandro quietly, deadly. Then let the city burn. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, spilling over the mansion walls, gold turning to red. Lucia stood by her window, watching it, clutching a rosary in her trembling hands. She didn't know what Alessandro planned, only that he was moving toward danger for her sake. And the thought terrified her. Lucia whispering, "Please don't do this because of me." But in another part of the house, Alessandro slipped on his black gloves, the symbol of who he truly was, a man made by violence, now wielding it for something fragile. He stepped outside, the scent of roses heavy in the air. And beneath those roses, the soil was still dark from yesterday's blood. He glanced at it once, then spoke quietly to himself. Alessandro, this ends today. Engines roared to life. Cars lined the driveway, men armed and ready. And as the gates opened, sunlight broke across the hood of Alessandro's black car. Bright, sharp, unforgiving. The city was about to witness something it had never seen before. A mafia boss not fighting for territory, but for redemption. And when the sun rose fully over the Romano estate, the roses glistened again, not with dew, but with the memory of blood. The city slept under a pale dawn, unaware that blood was about to paint its quiet streets. Inside the Romano estate, engines growled softly in the courtyard. Men in black suits stood ready, faces hard, eyes cold. This wasn't business. This was war. And at the center of it all, a man who once ruled with fear now carried something far more dangerous. Purpose. Enzo serious. Boss, everything's set. The men are armed, and the cars are waiting. Don Alessandro Romano stepped out of the mansion, his long coat brushing against the marble steps. The morning sun cut sharp lines across his face, half in light, half in shadow. He looked at Enzo. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned like fire beneath the ice. Alessandro, no more hiding, no more running. We finish this today. Lucia watched from the window above, her fingers clutching the curtain tightly. She could see the convoy forming, the black cars lined like soldiers, and Alessandro, standing still, staring at the horizon where the docks waited. She felt her throat tighten. She didn't ask for this. She never wanted anyone to fight for her. Lucia whispering to herself, "Please don't die for me." The convoy rolled out. Tires hissed against the wet asphalt. The city, waking up under a pale sun, didn't know that beneath its calm, two empires were about to collide. Alessandro sat in the front car, silent. His hands rested on his cane, a symbol of power, though today it felt more like a burden. Beside him, Enzo checked his gun. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The docks stretched out like a forgotten graveyard, rusted cranes, broken warehouses, and the distant sound of chains clinking in the wind. The Romano men spread out, silent and efficient. And there, by the old warehouse with shattered glass windows, they saw them, the Mancini crew, dozens of them, armed, waiting. And at the center, Vito Mancini himself. Vito stepped forward, his smile thin and poisonous. His white suit gleamed in the daylight, a mockery of purity. Vito mocking. Alessandro Romano, always the hero, eh? Risking your whole empire for one little maid? Alessandro flat, deadly calm. Where is the girl? Vito smirking. You'll see her. But first, I want to see you beg. The air tightened. The seagulls went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. And then, footsteps echoed from behind Vito. A young woman was pushed forward, tied, bruised, terrified. Lucia's sister. Lucia's sobs were still echoing in Alessandro's mind from earlier that morning. And now, seeing her sister trembling before the wolves, something inside him broke loose. Alessandro low, shaking with rage. Let her go. Now. Vito, you have something I want. Romano, the maid. Bring her here, and I'll let this one go. Enzo looked at his boss, eyes flicking between the two men. It was a trap. They all knew it. Enzo softly. Boss, we can't trust them. Alessandro. I know. He took a slow step forward, his coat catching the breeze. His voice dropped, quiet, cold enough to freeze blood. Alessandro, tell your men to lower their weapons. You want Lucia? You'll have to walk through me first. Vito chuckling. You're not in control anymore, old man. This is my city now. And then, a single gunshot split the silence. Nobody knew who fired first. But in an instant, chaos erupted. The air exploded with noise, bullets slicing through wood, men shouting, smoke filling the air. The Romano men moved like shadows, disciplined, relentless. But the Mancinis were many. Alessandro ducked behind a pillar, returning fire with precision. His mind wasn't on survival, it was on the promise he made. Lucia's terrified face flashed in his mind, her bruises, her tears, and that one whispered word, please. He refused to let it end that way. He pushed forward, bullets striking near his feet. One of his men fell. Enzo pulled him aside, shouting orders. And then, through the smoke, Alessandro saw her, Lucia's sister, being dragged back toward the dock's edge by one of Vito's guards. He didn't think. He ran. The gunfire faded behind him, replaced by the roar of his heartbeat. The guard raised his weapon, and Alessandro lunged. The fight was quick, brutal. Alessandro slammed the man into the ground, the crunch echoing through the warehouse. He cut the girl's bindings with a knife from his coat. Alessandro urgent, soft. You're safe now. Where's your sister? Girl trembling. They said. She ran. They're going after her. Alessandro's stomach turned cold. He looked toward the sunlight filtering through the shattered warehouse windows, toward the city. Lucia had fled, and the Mancinis were hunting her. Enzo shouting over gunfire. Boss! We've got to move. Alessandro roaring. Pull back. Secure the girl. I'm going after Lucia. Enzo grabbed his arm, eyes wide. Boss, it's suicide. Alessandro. So was letting her die. He tore his arm free, his voice echoing like thunder through the chaos. Minutes later, Alessandro's car tore down the coastal road, the sea flashing beside him. The wind roared through the open window, mixing with his racing thoughts. Every scar, every ghost from his past, all of it led here. To one moment. To one woman who had shown him what fear really looked like, and what courage meant. He wasn't fighting for power anymore. He was fighting for her. Back at the docks, the fight still raged. The Romano men pushed forward, and Vito Mancini, bleeding from the shoulder, shouted orders into the chaos. But something had shifted. For the first time, his men hesitated. The name Romano still carried weight, and now it carried fury. Vito snarling, "Find him. Don't let him reach her." But it was already too late. Alessandro's car was gone, disappearing into the sunlit roads that led straight into the heart of the city. He reached the marketplace, streets alive with people, unaware of the war bleeding into their mourning. And then he saw her, Lucia, running barefoot across the cobblestones, tears streaking down her face. Behind her, two men in suits, guns drawn, pushing through the crowd. Alessandro shouting, "Lucia!" She turned, her eyes wide with disbelief. Lucia crying out, "Sir!" Gunfire erupted. The crowd screamed. Alessandro dove forward, pulling her down behind a fruit stand as bullets splintered the wood above them. Lucia sobbing, "I told you not to come." Alessandro fierce, "And let them kill you?" Never. For a moment, time froze. They were inches apart, breathing hard, the world exploding around them. But in that chaos, there was clarity. Lucia's eyes searched his. The fear was still there. But so was something else, trust. Lucia whispering, "They'll never stop." Alessandro quietly, steady, "Then neither will I." He rose, pulling her to her feet. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, police closing in, rival cars approaching. The war that began in the shadows had now spilled into the streets. And as Alessandro turned toward the sound, shielding Lucia behind him, he saw something that froze his blood. Through the chaos, standing on a rooftop across the square, was Vito Mancini. A sniper rifle aimed directly at them. The city held its breath. Lucia's scream caught in her throat. And as the trigger was pulled, the screen goes black. In the war for one Maid, one man was about to pay a price the entire city would remember forever. The shot rang through the morning air, a single, sharp crack that cut through the screams and sirens. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Birds scattered from rooftops. People froze in fear. And in the middle of the chaos, Lucia's trembling hand reached out toward the man who had stood between her and death. Don Alessandro Romano fell to his knees. His black coat billowed as the world around him blurred. A red bloom spread slowly across his chest, dark, vivid, silent. Lucia caught him before he hit the ground. "No, no, please. Stay with me, please." His vision flickered. The noise faded, sirens, footsteps, shouting, all melted into a single echo. Her voice, Alessandro's weak smile. "Lucia, are you hurt?" Lucia sobbing. "You shouldn't have come back for me." Alessandro soft, fading. "I told you I finish what I start." He coughed, blood staining his lips. But even now, his hand found hers and gripped it firmly. There was strength still, the kind of strength that defied death itself. The city didn't know it yet, but the man who had ruled its underworld for 2 decades had just taken his final stand. Not for power, not for vengeance, but for one woman, the one who showed him there was still something purer left in a corrupt world. From the rooftop, Vito Mancini lowered his rifle, a cruel smile twisting across his face. Vito mocking. "Even kings bleed, Romano." He turned to leave, but then a single sound froze him. The faint crack of a gun behind him. Vito staggered. His eyes widened in shock as a crimson line spread across his white suit. He turned, and there, standing in the shadow of the rooftop stairwell, was Enzo, his gun still smoking. Enzo cold, shaking with rage. That was for him. Vito collapsed, the rifle slipping from his hand. And just like that, the war ended. Not with an explosion, but with a whisper. Hours later, the sky broke open. Rain washed through the streets of the city, over the marketplace, over the broken stalls, and over the crimson stains left behind. Lucia sat by Alessandro's hospital bed. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound that filled the room. He was alive, barely. Doctors said it was a miracle, but miracles come at a price. Lucia softly, trembling. "You should have let me go. You didn't have to risk everything for me." He turned his head slightly, eyes still weak but burning with the same cold fire she'd come to know. Alessandro hoarse. "If I hadn't, then what kind of man would I be?" Lucia crying. "They'll come after you again. You killed Vito, his family won't stop." Alessandro quiet. "Then let them come." Even on a hospital bed, hooked to wires, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd already faced death and wasn't afraid to meet it again. Enzo entered the room, soaked from the rain. He nodded respectfully to Lucia before turning to Alessandro. "Enzo, the city's quiet, boss. Too quiet. Word's spreading fast. They're saying you took a bullet for a maid. The whole underworld's in shock." Alessandro's lips curved slightly. "Alessandro, let them remember that." Enzo confused. "Remember what, boss?" Alessandro low, steady. "That even a monster can bleed for something good." For a long moment, silence filled the room again. Lucia's eyes shimmered with tears as she looked at the man who had once terrified an entire city, now broken, human, and somehow more powerful than ever. She reached out and touched his hand gently. Lucia whispering, "You didn't just save me. You saved my sister. My life. I'll never forget that." He turned his gaze toward the window, the rain sliding down the glass like fading memories. "Alessandro, go live, Lucia. That's how you repay me. Leave this city before it swallows you again." Lucia, I can't just walk away from you. Alessandro quiet. Final. You have to. Tears ran down her cheeks. He had given her freedom, but it felt like losing everything all over again. She wanted to say thank you. She wanted to say she would stay, but the words never came. Instead, she just squeezed his hand one last time and walked out into the rain. Outside, the city that once roared with violence now whispered in sorrow. News spread through every street, every alley, every mansion and dive bar. The Romano boss took a bullet for a maid. Some called it madness, some called it weakness, but others called it redemption. Days passed. The Romano mansion grew still, no parties, no laughter, no guards crowding the halls. Only one sound filled those marble corridors now, the faint echo of footsteps. As Enzo stood by the boss's side, watching the rain fall endlessly outside. Enzo quiet. They say the Mancini family's gone underground. Everyone's afraid. Even the cops are silent. Alessandro weak but steady. Fear keeps order, but it doesn't build peace. Enzo, so what now, boss? He turned his eyes toward the city skyline. The storm had cleared, and faint sunlight broke through the clouds, golden, pure, almost peaceful. Alessandro softly. Now we start over. Weeks later, Lucia and her sister boarded a train out of the city. No one stopped them. No one dared. She carried nothing but a small bag and a memory of the man who had once ruled through terror, but died protecting her from it. Lucia voiceover, gentle, reflective. He saved me when no one else would. And maybe that's what redemption really is. Not erasing what you've done, but choosing who you'll be when the darkness comes again. Her train disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind the city that had fallen silent. A city forever changed by one man's final act of mercy. Back in the Romano mansion, the chair behind the boss's desk sat empty. But on that desk, beside a glass of untouched whiskey, lay a single red rose. No blood this time, just the quiet beauty of something that survived the storm. And though the city would one day roar again, somewhere, deep within its heartbeat, it would always remember the day it fell silent. For the man who fought for one fragile soul. And if you've made it this far, you know that every choice has a price. And sometimes, the most dangerous wars aren't fought with guns, but with hearts that dare to feel again. Plus, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because next time, we'll uncover the secret that Lucia left behind. And trust me, it will change everything.